One of these things is not like the other. One of these things just doesn't belong. Can you tell which thing is not like the other before I finish my song?
Hey everybody, it's Draisaitl here for Straight Off the Pipe. Pretty hilarious that a guy who two-handed slashes a player in an attempt to injure is assessed the same suspension from the NHL Player Safety. The guy behind me, George Parros, as Darnell Nurse was for instigating a fight from a guy who was pretty willing to get after it. I'll show some clips here, from the panel. With BX saying the league's not hiring right now to Dallas Eakins after Eakins doesn't seem to have a problem with the suspensions being the same, and doesn't think they're related. I kind of think Nurse got into that fight with Hague because of the shenanigans with Pietrangelo trying to chop Leon's arm off earlier, just seconds earlier. And I love BX calling him out, saying the league's not hiring right now. Also, it doesn't happen all that often, but I agree with Kelly Rudy saying it should have been a 3-game suspension. And yeah, I think it's 2 or 3 games for what Pietrangelo did, and probably more if he actually injured Draisaitl. But the fact that Draisaitl wasn't injured, I think, is lucky for Leon, and it's not because the intent wasn't there. I think the intent was there. And the other thing is, we'll show the Craig Button clips. But how can you claim you got jumped in a fight, but the other guy didn't throw the first punch? To me, I don't buy that. I don't call it getting jumped. I think it's 2 guys that kind of wanted to get after it for several games prior. And they finally did. Yeah, Nurse skated a long way to get into that fight. So I guess you can kind of technically say he instigated it, but claiming that Hague was jumped when just earlier he asked Nurse to fight, I think it's kind of bullshit. When the other guy doesn't throw the first punch, I don't think you can claim to be jumped. And like Bieksa says, that fight has been brewing for 2 games. I agree fully with Bieksa, and man, do I love that guy as an analyst. I think he's great. And I disagree saying Nurse had an advantage like Eakins does in this clip. If you aren't throwing the first punch, I'm not sure how you've got an advantage. Yeah, you grab the guy first, but you let him throw first. Like the advantage is gone once you let him gather himself and start swinging. So I don't buy that at all. I do like Eakins always playing the devil's advocate on everything, and I think him and BX feed off each other, and I kind of enjoy that. And the little jabs that go back and forth, it is a little bit entertaining, but yeah. My thoughts about the guy behind me, Parros, is he a problem? Yeah, I kind of think so, but I think it's the root of the problem is not George Parros. It goes a little further up the chain to Colin Campbell, and probably even further up to Gary Bettman. They don't want to show favoritism to one team versus the other, but in doing so, they're kind of favoring one team over the other. There is no way that slash is the equivalent of Nurse instigating a fight on the scale of player safety and harm. If you really were concerned with player safety, you would crack down a little bit harder on that slash, where Pietrangelo leaves his side of the ice, goes after Draisaitl, and Draisaitl just happens to be the guy that's tied for scoring lead in the playoffs, I believe, with Jason Robertson. You want to protect star players like the NBA. You are the furthest thing from it right now, the NHL. And Parros gets his direction from somewhere, and I believe that's Colin Campbell, and ultimately from Gary Bettman. And also, I think we have to point fingers at the NHLPA. If you want things to change, you will lobby for that in your collective bargaining agreement, but I have yet to see anybody bring up player safety in any of their collective bargaining agreement, meetings. they seem to be okay with status quo. So status quo is what you're going to get. So I think it's hard to be upset. I think you have to deal with what is and carry on. And for the Oilers, they need to win the hockey game tonight. And then come home and end this series and move on to the next. Enough with the bullshit, because it's not going to sort itself out. So just take care of business on the ice is what you need to do. Anyway, I'll show the clips now. Let's go.
Minutes ago, news coming down from the NHL Department of Player Safety and Alex Pietrangelo. That pretty nasty slash there on Leon Draisaitl, and he's going to get a 1-game suspension. And Pietrangelo, we'll dig in on this in a second. It comes on the heels also of this. Moments after that, Darnell Nurse steps in the final minute, instigates a fight with Nick Hague, and for that instigator, the 1-game automatic suspension will be upheld. A lot of thought that it was going to be rescinded. So what you have now is what a lot of people are viewing as a bit of a false equivalency. Darnell Nurse has a fight in the last minute, a 1-game suspension, and a slash, and a 1-game suspension for Pietrangelo. Let's start it up. Did the league get this right?
I think the league did get it right. I said before, 1 game. I think I'm right this time with all you guys.
But what about the notion of a false equivalency? Like, Darnell Nurse is
the league's not hiring right now. Before you answer this, the league's not hiring.
That's right. No, but to me, they're two totally separate things. One thing has nothing to do with the other. The other one's an instigator. Mm-hmm. It's in the rule book. That's the call. The other is a slash.
But they could have rescinded it.
Well, they could have, but they didn't. Instigator has nothing to do with the slash at all. The slash looks terrible. I don't like it in our game, but I think the thing that really helped Las Vegas here was the beast, Draisaitl, was not hurt. Like, he got up, he was giving it to the bench on the way by. The guy's a real battling player, and I think they take all of that into account.
I would like some discretion with the instigator, but I mean, it's tough to really argue it. It's a clear-cut instigator. So, again, mutually exclusive, forget that. But Draisaitl means 3 strings in German. I thought he lost 3 fingers with that slash. Right. Like, that was a vicious slash. So, like, we have another case here, and it was a regular season. So keep like in your mind that suspensions are weighted differently in the playoffs. This was a regular season by Dylan. He got 1 game for this. A little bit of a reactionary, intentional, right? But I see a big difference between a guy who gets hit and follows through with a slash on the hand. Okay, we've seen that. Let's go back to Petro. Like, there's a big difference in intent between that and this. So the only thing I can think in my head is, like, Brian Burke's in my head somewhere, and he's like, oh, it's weighted per series. And so this 1 game in the second round is like 4 to 5 regular season games, Kelly.
I don't back down from my earlier comment pregame. 3 games. That he stalked him. I mean, he goes right after him. That is 2 seconds after the Draisaitl backhand pass. There's no room for it in our game. It's vicious. It looks ugly. Doesn't make our game look very good. And that, as much as I think Pietrangelo is an amazing player and they need him, and 1 game is good for Vegas, that's a 3-game suspension.
But what did he say in the hearing? Like, what was his defense? You can't say I didn't mean to. You can't say
it was no history.
What's the defense?
No history, and maybe they brought up even the caned cross-check, and he said, look what happened to me. We're going to find out. We don't know yet. There'll be more reporting. Sportsnet Central will probably have some of those answers as well. But 1 game for Nurse, 1 game for Pietrangelo.
All right. Everybody's been talking about this stuff for 24 hours. Let's get right to it. The 1-game suspension to Alex Pietrangelo. What did you think?
Well, I think a lot differently today than I did yesterday. I should be on your blew it segment because I blew it. Wait a second.
Okay, I'll let you.
Listen, I have the stage here, okay?
That's fair.
McDavid came out and he very clearly said it. I agreed with Connor McDavid. Then I went into speculation mode.
Right.
Like, my job isn't to speculate about what could happen. My job is to say, this is what I think should happen. So, do I think that a suspension should have happened? Yeah, I agreed with McDavid. I think the Department of Player Safety came short. I think it should have been 2 games at least. This is late in the game, and he takes his stick from above his head and absolutely targets Leon Draisaitl's arm. And you can say he didn't get hurt. What happens if he does get hurt and Leon Draisaitl's lost? That, to me, is to Connor McDavid's exact point. That's deliberate intent to injure. The penalty and punishment did not fit the crime. Yeah. And I think that what he did, how many times you seen that in a game? How many times you see that play in a game? You don't. And that, to me, you want that out, there needs to be a stronger deterrent.
And one of the things I thought, when you said you thought initially it was going to be a fine, to me you were just basing it on what you had seen in the past, right? And you brought up Louis DeBrusque, bringing it up on the broadcast, the fact that, well, he didn't hit his head, So it's probably a fine, which is a pretty sad state of NHL player safety, that if you don't hit the head, it's just a fine. It's not a suspension.
Okay, yeah, but you're right. But what I'm supposed to do is just say what should happen.
Yeah,
and
no,
I
that's
didn't
fair.
do that. I speculate on what could happen. They don't pay me for that, Jay.
That's fair.
They don't
That's
pay me
fair.
to speculate.
Hey, give this man some props, okay? He's being honest. Now, did the league do the right thing by not rescinding the automatic one-game suspension to Darnell Nurse?
Well, if you look at the rule, and you look at the rule for instigating and what it has to do to meet the requirement for a one-game suspension, it meets it to a T.
Yeah.
Darnell Nurse, at the last 5 minutes, comes out. He targets the player. He goes right after the player. And the player's not engaged with Darnell Nurse, and Darnell Nurse picks him out. And when Darnell Nurse does that, that is instigating. That's what got him the one-game suspension.
Right. And I think you're absolutely right about all those points. Now, there's one caveat that I will throw in here, and it's been brought up by people smarter than myself. The fact that after this game, Captain Mark Stone of the Vegas Golden Knights had this to say about Nick Hague and Darnell Nurse.
Yeah, it was good. It's a good answer by Hager. It's a good fight. I think he asked him off the face-up, but then gets jumped, so that's the way to answer the bell by him.
Okay, so he said he asked him off the face-off. So that would indicate that Hague was a willing combatant. So I guess my point is, yes, it meets all the criteria that you pointed out. But is it truly the spirit of the rule? I like that phrase, the spirit of the rule. Is it truly the spirit of the rule? To me, the spirit of the rule is defensive player, Darnell comes in, pummels him. That's not what this was. This was Nick Hague asking for a fight, Darnell coming in, giving him fight, taking 8 punches, and then they both
I
fight.
would love to hear that clip again, because everybody's missing the part where Mark Stone says he jumped him. He jumped him. He instigated.
Did he jump him?
That's what Mark Stone said. You want to say about what Mark Stone is saying, asking for a fight. Good for Hager. He said he also jumped him. Listen, that is the definition of instigating. Nick Hague is tied up with another player, and Darnell Nurse comes over, tracks him down, goes out. I don't care if you ask for a fight. That doesn't mean you get to go and instigate it. That doesn't give you free pass to instigate the thing. And Mark Stone said he jumped him. Yeah,
Mark Stone said he jumped him, but we watched it.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah. Listen, you saw it. We watched it.
Yeah.
Hague was minding his own business with another player.
was he though? Minding his own business?
Do we need to see the video again?
Yeah, okay.
I think we can play. Can we not
We
play
can
the
play
video
it again. I'd love to see the video again, because like I'm looking at it and I'm seeing 2 Vegas players with 1 Oiler player, so I'm seeing Nurse come in. Let's watch.
Here we go. Let's watch
we're
it.
gonna
Here we
see
go.
it again.
So here's
I
Hague.
got
He's on the boards
Hague.
there. Oh, and here comes Nurse.
Right.
Yeah. He got jumped.
Okay.
He
but-
got jumped.
Okay, but
That's instigating.
that's instigating?
Yeah, how he comes off the bench and goes right after him.
Yeah,
That's
but he just
instigating, not
asked
off
him
the
to
bench.
fight.
Doesn't matter. Just because you ask somebody to fight. Nick Hague is involved with
But it was
another
just
player.
seconds after he asked him to
That
fight.
doesn't matter. That doesn't give you the right to fly in there and jump a player.
Okay, all right.
We disagree.
That's fair. I like it. It's kind of fun.
That is a disagreement.
We're disagreeing.
But you know what?
Well, actually, I'm not even saying
We're not even agreeing to disagree. We're just disagreeing.
Well, and I'm not even saying I disagree with them not rescinding it. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that that's a pretty interesting thing for Mark Stone to say to a reporter publicly, and then for the NHL to just disregard it.
Yeah,
That's all.
But the NHL isn't suspending players based on what the words of a captain are.
Right.
They're suspending based on the actions of Darnell
Yeah, that's
Nurse.
fair. I'm just saying that seems like incriminating evidence. If the glove don't fit, you must acquit. That's what Johnny Cochran told us.